Let's loop this Excel worksheet with Power Automate Desktop. Take each one of these values in the country column, do a web search, find the result, web scrape, and write the result back to the corresponding cell in the capital column. You can download this Excel book from the description below if you want to do this with me. I recommend you do so because you will learn so much faster. I placed it here on my desktop. It's called data.xlsx. Then I go to Power Automate Desktop where I have an empty flow. We will first read the Excel data. So to do so, I will find a launch Excel. A launch Excel just specify which workbook we want to work in. That will be the data.xlsx. That is an Excel workbook. In the launch Excel, I will not open a blank document. I will open up the following document. Now we need a path. So I click down here. I click this select file. Then I go to my desktop where my data.xlsx file is. I say open. Make instance visible. I untick this. That is just if you want to see what's going on while Power Automate Desktop works with your Excel sheet. I rarely use it. If I scroll a little bit down, I can see that the variables produced is called Excel instance. That means that I can refer to this variable name later in the flow if I want to work in this Excel book, which we want. Here I click Save. Then we can read the data from the Excel book. We can take the sheet and read the data into a data table. We will do that with a read from Excel worksheet. The reason why we do this instead of just working in the Excel UI is that a data table is much faster and reliable to work in. So we will read it into a data table and then we will write it back to Excel later in the flow. Here you can see that we specify that we want to work in the Excel instance. I want to retrieve not the value of a single cell, but all available values from worksheet. Variables produced is called Excel data. That is an Excel data table. A data table is the same as an Excel sheet. It has rows and columns, but it just works much faster at the runtime of Power Automate Desktop. Runtime means while we run the flow. Click the advanced here. Here you can see that the first line of range contains column names. We will tick that because we have header data in the first row of our Excel sheet. Then I click Save. Whenever we launch an Excel sheet, we also want to close it again. And that is because otherwise Power Automate Desktop can and will lock your Excel instance, and you have to restart either Excel or your computer to unlock it. So here we find the Close Excel. For now, we will not save the document. I'll just click Save. Let's just test that we can actually read this into the data table called Excel data. So I click Run up here. What you want to see here is that you get no errors. To see that is that when you have a green check mark down here saying status ready, and over here to the right in the Excel data, you see 4 rows and 3 columns. Let's double click it and just inspect our data. Here we have our header row, ID, country, and capital, and we have each one of these data rows down here. What we want to look at is that these rows here in the data table, they have an index. The first row, that is index 0. The second one is 1, 2, 3. As a human, we just need to get our head around that. There's a good reason for it. And that's because it's 0 index like all collections in programming. We will use that information a little later in this tutorial. Here I click Close. So now we saw that this works. We can do a for each of these values. A for each just loop all these rows one by one, and that is exactly what we want when we want to do the web searches. So I find a for each, drag it in between the read from Excel worksheet and close Excel. The value to iterate. Click this little X here. Here we can find our Excel data. That's the data table. Double click it. The CurrentItem. That is a variable to store the individual items from the collection, which is the data table we're iterating over. So whenever we iterate over this data table, we do it one by one. We take each row one by one and do something with them. We refer to each one of these rows as CurrentItems. So here I click Save. If we ran it now, nothing would happen because we haven't specified what would happen to each one of these data rows. It will just run, it will work fine, but nothing will happen. Let's add a display message. A display message just display a message. It's good for testing. We will of course use it, replace it later with a web action. So here in the message to display, we will refer to the CurrentItem. That was all the data rows one by one. So I'll click the X and take the CurrentItem. Make sure you don't refer to the Excel data, but the CurrentItem. If we stopped here and ran the flow, we would get the entire row. That will be all 3 columns, comma separated. We want to dig into the country column. To do so, you go up to this M. You do a hard bracket start. We can refer to the indexes of the column. And again, those ones are 0 indexed. So if we want the second column, that will be index 1 and square parentheses in the end. That's not what we want. We want to make it a little bit more robust. We can refer to the column names instead. So let's delete the 1. Then we will add the column names. And since this is a text variable, then we will have a single quotation marks like this. And here I want to say country like this. One nice setting is to keep the message box always on top. That one we make sure that when we display this message, it's not hidden behind other applications. Not 100% necessary, but for now, it's good. I will click Save. So here, let's run it. Let's test that we can print each one of these countries one by one. I'll have it on my other screen. I have India, Canada, Denmark, Indonesia. That's it. That works. Now we will use the same technique. That will be the CurrentItem and country in squared parentheses. We will do that to populate web searches. That could be on Google. To do web searches for each one of these countries, we first need to open up a browser. Here I find a launch. Pick your favorite browser. I prefer Microsoft Edge. And we drag it in after the Read from Excel worksheet. We will launch a new instance and then we will have an initial URL. Let's just pick Google here. So I'll say google.com. The variables produced will be browser, so we can refer to this variable later in the flow when we want to use this browser instance. I click Save. Now I want to test it and I don't want to run my entire flow. I can do a smart thing here. Click with your mouse to the left of the 4. That will add a breakpoint. A breakpoint will stop our automation, so we will pause there. Then you can also right click on this Launch New Microsoft Edge and say Run from here. And then we will just run that action. It will pause our flow. We can see that it works and we can start to automate the Google browser. I can just click Stop here. Let's remove this breakpoint again. Now I want to, instead of this display message, I want to, let me find my browser. I want to do a Google search. So open up the display message. Mark this CurrentItem country. Control-C to copy it. We are lazy as automation developers. Cancel. Now we can delete this display message. We want to populate a text field on the web page. So we go up here. We find a populate text field on web page and we drag it in here. So first, we can see here we work in the browser instance. We created that when we open up the google.com. Then we need to pick an UI element. Click this drop down, add UI element, and here you can see I can move my mouse around this web page. I want to input into this text area. So once your mouse is over, it turns red, like this. Press Ctrl on your keyboard click with your mouse, you have created your first UI element. Then down here in text, I'll say Control V, we will paste the expression in. Now we will put each one of these countries into a Google search. Let's also search for not only the country, but let's also add a space and then say capital. So we will get the country and then a capital. We'll do a Google search of that. So here we're combining this value with some text. Feel free to not do that. One important thing is to go down here to advanced. We will see this setting called unfocused text box after filling it. Untick that and click save. What this does is that once we have done a populate text field with Power Automate Desktop, that could be India, then Power Automate Desktop, if we have not unticked this, it will take the focus away. I want to send an enter click here so we can do the web search, and that's why we removed that setting. So here I go back. To send this enter click, I'll find a send keys and drag it in after the populate text field on web page. We will send an enter click. We can either write return here in curly brackets, or easier, just say insert special keys, choose MISC, find the enter, and Power Automate Desktop does it for us. And then we click save. One best practice is to move back to the front page, because let me show you here. I can say India, click enter. Then if I do another search, this might be a different UI element because the site has changed. It might work here in Google, by the way, but if you're on another system, the best practice is always to go back to the front page. We can do that very easily by just going up to actions. And here I want to find a go to web page, and we will do that in the start of the for each. Here we will still be in our browser instance. We will navigate to a URL. That one will be the google.com. I'll click save. Now let's go test our automation that we can iterate to each one of these countries, and we can populate a text field. So here I'm launching Excel, launching Edge. We're navigating to Google. Then we start populating India capital. Now it will be Canada capital. So we can see that we are doing this. This one is fine, and it worked. Now we need to take whatever capital that is. Here it's Jakarta. We will take that back and write it into the third column of our Excel sheet. So I go back here. What I want to do now is, because we have this Excel data, that's the data that we iterate over. That will be India, Canada, Denmark, Indonesia. This is a data table. There's no direct connection from this data table to the Excel sheet. We just read it into this data table. And since we're iterating over our data table, we will say, where in the Excel book do I need to write the India capital? Well, I need to write the India capital. Here it's index 0, that's the first row. But in Excel, this row here is index 2. And let me just show you, just so we agree. So I open up my original data, and that will be this. You can see here it's row 2. So I will start by row 2 and start writing it back to Excel. Let me close this. Let me go back here. So to do so, we will introduce a helping variable. We will have a set variable. We will drag that one in here. The variable we will call at not new var. That's best practice to always rename those. So we'll call it row number. We will give it the value 2. That's because we will start in the Excel row named indexed 2. I'll click save. I also want to increase this one here. So for each one of these iterations, I also need to jump one below in the Excel rows. Do that in 2 ways, either with a set variable or maybe much more easier with an increase variable. So drag it in the end of the for each. This is very important. I repeat, it will stay in the end. The variable name, click this X, double click the row number like this. We will increase it by 1, so it will have 2, 3, 4, 5, Then we will click save. Now we have done this, we can start extracting the data. So once we have done a search, we want and have the return key, we want to extract the data, and then we will write it to Excel. To do so, we will find and extract data from web page, which will be here. Drag it in. We can see here we stay in the browser instance. To activate this, we need to activate the latest Google search. That will be this one here. Then you have this live web helper. I want to pick the capital, and here, go down here to under the map that will be to the right, pick this Jakarta from here. Now you will not, I repeat, not hold the control, you will right click, hover your mouse over the extract element value, and pick the Jakarta. That's it. It will be the same element for each one of these searches. So here I'll click finish. We will call it in the variables produced, we will not call it data from web page, but we will call it capital. And then we will click save. So here we can start just seeing what this capital variable is. In fact, it is a data table. Since we are going to do all 4 iterations, it will take a little time, but then we can talk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That will really help me and my channel. I can do much more videos for you. Thank you. So here we are iterating to the 4 capitals or the 4 rows. We add the capital and then we web scrape the data back. This seems to work. It's not producing any errors. We can see that we iterate to all 4 countries, their capital, and we don't get an error. Then I go back here because what I wanted to show you was the capital variable. That one got created here in the extract data from web page. If I go over here to the right, I can see it says 1 rows and 1 columns. If I double click that, we can see that, yes, we have a capital here. You can also see it's a data table. And this might be a little bit counterintuitive because it's only 1 value, but it is a data table called capital. We have 1 row and 1 column. That means that if we want to refer to this variable, we will refer to the capital variable, that will be the data table, and then we will say, look in the 0th row and the 0th column. Yes, that's how we will do it. Then we can click close. So after the extraction, then we will write it back to Excel. Find a write to Excel worksheet, drag it in after the extract data from web page. Here I must state that that is an error I often see from beginners. If you don't have the increase variable in the end, then we will produce an error in this flow. So that's very important that you have it in this order. We're still in the Excel instance. What value do we need to write? Well, we just saw that. We will write whatever is in the capital data table like this. We also want to go in the 0th row. That will be the first row. Like this, it's 0 indexed. So 2 hard brackets, 0.0. Then we will write it back to our Excel. Now we will write it back to a specified cell. We will specify the column, and here we'll need to specify the index of the column in Excel or the letter. Here we cannot specify the header in Excel. I think it's more intuitive to say C because we often want to refer to Excel columns with letters. Then we also need to specify the row number. We created a variable for that, remember? We had this 2 up here. So here I just say X, double click the row number, and I say save. One last thing is that we also want to save this data. So I open up the close Excel, and here I say save document. Then I click save. Now we are ready to run. We're ready to see that everything works. And as you can see here, if I hover my mouse over, I already have 3 browsers open. I choose to delete all these. But again, we want to close the browser. Once we're done, we're cleaning up the room. So let's just add a close web browser here. And we will put it after the for each. Again, that's important. That will just close the browser instance. I will click save. Let's run the flow again. It's very exciting. Now we will write it back to Excel. It will take a little bit longer. Please stay tuned. I will show you some best practices. We will also speed this flow up a bit and apply a few of my best tricks that will make you more capable of building robust and fast flows. So let us just see that this works. Jakarta will be the last one. We didn't produce any errors. Success. Then we will go to our dataset. I will double click. And here we have it. We have New Delhi, Ottawa, Copenhagen or København, and then we have Jakarta. Please let me know in the comments, by the way, where you're from. I'm sure you are all around the world. Now we will do a little faster way because we will write it back to a data table first, and then we will populate it into this Excel. This will be faster, especially if you have large data sets. So let's delete all these results. We will click save. And by the way, if you see any errors, make sure that you have unticked this auto save up here. So I just save it manually. One other thing that you might see is that if it turns gray, then you want to go into Launch Excel and tick this Make Instance Visible. We didn't see it, so we will just let it be. Now I want to write it back into the data table. That will be this Excel data instead of the Excel sheet. And that's because that's faster. So I'll write the results back here, 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 here. And once the entire data table is ready, then I'll write it back to Excel. One important thing is we're not starting in row 2 now, we're starting in row 0. So we will change this row number up here. So the set variable before the for each, I will have a 0. Click save. Now I want to update my data table. So what I will do here is to find a update data table item, move it right after the write to Excel worksheet, at least before the increase. And then I want to say the data table that I'm working in. And then I want to find the Excel data like this. What column do I want to write in? Well, I want to write it into the capital. Which row do I want to use? That was the row number. So 0, 1, 2, 3. In this data set at least, I'll pick the row number. What value do I want to write in? Well, that will be the value from before. Let's just practice the expression once more. That will be the capital. I'll go in here, find a hard bracket, 0, hard bracket end, hard bracket start, 0, hard bracket end, like this. Then I click save. So now we're updating the data table. I'll move this right to Excel sheet, move that outside of the for each. Doesn't matter if you put it here or here, just outside this for each. And then I also want to open it again, because now we will not write the capital 00. I will write the Excel data. That will be the entire data table. So click this X, choose the Excel data. Where do I want to write it? Right now it's a table, and that is very smart because when we write it back to Excel, the table will place itself in the correct rows and columns. We will just need to specify the upper left corner. The upper left corner where we will start will be column A and row 2 because we have headers in the first row. When we're writing a data table to Excel, it will not print the headers. So what we will do here is to click save. Then we are ready to test it. What we did here was to not write it back to Excel. We will write it back to a data table because this was fast. And please stay tuned. I will show you more best practices. Then we click run. Now we will see that everything works. Once that works, we can put the last best practices. That would be to use some variables. So here we don't get any errors. That's fine. So we can update the data table for now. And it's always nice just to test your automation here and there. When you build, then not build the entire thing, because then you might see some errors in the beginning and that will be harder to debug. That's it. Everything is fine. Let's just inspect our data to see that we also get the capital now. We do. Let's do one more thing, because we need to learn some new stuff here. So I'll delete all the values again here. I'll click Save, close the Excel book. Let me teach you some of the best practices. Whenever you use a value more than once, we often want to create a variable. Here I use the Google and the google.com twice. So I want to create a variable for that, and that's very easy. So I'll have a set variable. I'll drag it in. I usually want to, I can do it here. I usually want to have my variables in the start of the flow. These are things that can change. Imagine that this URL changed. I doubt it will change with Google, but imagine that this changed. Then I don't need to go into my flow and find all the places where I used it. I just need to change it once. I'll call this one URL. The value will be, again, google.com. Then I will go into the Launch New Microsoft Edge. I'll delete this initial URL. I'll click the X and use the URL variable. Click Save. Nothing will change, but this will be a lot prettier. It will be much more easy to update. Then I will double click the Go to Web page. And here I will also use the URL. Click Save. One other thing is that path, that could be this Excel path, can often change. Right now I have it on my desktop, but I might want to place it somewhere else. I want to move it to another user. So I often want to use a variable for this as well. So let me go here and I can choose to right click, and in Windows 11 I can choose to copy as path. I can also, if I have Windows 10, I can say Shift on my keyboard and then right click. Then you will also see the copy as path, like this. And then I'll go back. And then I will find another set variable, drag it in, either before the URL or after. So here I will call this one Excel path, and I'll say Control V. Here I will remove the quotation marks. I could just use this, but maybe I want to read the Excel book from this place, but I want to save it to some other Excel sheet that's convenient if we don't want to overwrite original data. So then I will just specify which folder I'm in. Here I'm in desktop, but that could easily change to a network drive. So I just need to change this Excel path. And then I click Save. Then I can use this variable in the Launch Excel first. So I'll double click to open it. I will delete this. And then I will find my variable here in the X, find the Excel path, which is here. Then I also want to add a backward slash. I want to say data.xlsx, and I click Save. I can also choose here in the Close Excel to not save the document, but save the document as. Again, I can use the Excel path here. And then I can, for example, say a backward slash. Then we can call this one result.xlsx or output. Then I click Save. Before we run it, if I just change this path and then I move the initial Excel book, then we will also change it down here, which will be very convenient. Let's go run it again. We will see that these best practices work. And again, if you like what you see, please let me know here in the comments. That will help me and my channel more than you think. Thank you. At least we don't get any errors in the reading. That's always a great win inside me when I develop these flows, because yes, you will do some small errors here and there when you develop. Don't worry about that. We all do it. Just make sure you can fix those. And you'll do that by watching these videos. So here you can see that we still have this data.xlsx, but now we have a result.xlsx with all our results. This is so nice. If you want to learn more Power Automate Desktop, then I have created the next step for you, which is right here in this video. Go click it. That will take you to your next Power Automate Desktop lesson where you will learn so much more. See you.